applications. So in today's session, we will cover, first of all, an overview of university applications and UCAS as well, UCAS Hub. Then we'll look at some tips for choosing your courses and your universities. And then we'll have a look in a bit more detail at the application process for Cambridge. And finally, we'll wrap up with some guidance and advice about making a competitive application. So on your slide that you can see there, I've got all of the different elements that come together like jigsaw pieces to make up the completed puzzle of a university application. Not sure that I love that metaphor, but let's roll with it. So in the purple ones at the top, so teacher's reference, general information like your educational history, personal circumstances, and the personal statement. All of those are within the UCAS application. So those are submitted via UCAS to all of your university and course choices. The ones in green, so some additional forms, admissions assessment if required, interview if you're invited to interview, and written work samples if required. Those are all specific to sometimes Oxford and Cambridge. In this session, I'll be speaking specifically from a Cambridge perspective. A lot is applicable for both universities, but I would urge you to look at the Oxford web pages for specific information about the Oxford courses for obvious reasons. So essentially, these bits in green are additional things that we require you to do. Now, I'll come later to talking about why we ask you to do these additional things, whether it's filling in a form, submitting some samples of written work, taking an admissions test. But that's the overview, the basic bird's eye view, shall we say, of how the Cambridge application process has some additional elements to UCAS, which is the next section. So UCAS Hub is the online portal where you apply to university. I'm sure you've all heard of UCAS, the Universities and Colleges Admissions Service. You can register for a UCAS, account, and start your application for 2024 entry now, but you can't submit your UCAS application until the 6th of September. So it's relatively soon, but yeah, you can't submit until the 6th of September. Once you have registered on UCAS with your email address, you need to answer some initial questions. So things like whether you're an undergraduate or postgraduate, what you're applying for, basically the degree level, and also year of entry. And then you'd be taken to your own UCAS Hub dashboard, as it's called, and you need to click Start to begin your application. Some key things to remember: you have to complete all of the required questions, but you don't have to complete them all in one sitting, as it were. You can save your progress each time you log in and fill out sections, and then it will save and you can come back to it. What you need to do, importantly, is make sure that your email address is up to date, because UCAS will send you information and updates via email. So make sure that your email address is up to date and make sure that you're keeping an eye out for any emails from UCAS. You also need to speak to your school, your teacher. Maybe you have a universities and careers advisor, someone who will be organising your teacher's references, because you need to input a school buzzword. So this is kind of like just any word that your school has chosen that links your UCAS application to the school, so that your teacher can add your reference for you into UCAS. For sections on education history, employment history, you need to put all of your qualifications from secondary school onwards, and also details of any full-time or part-time paid work. Now, these are just some things that I've picked out from the UCAS web pages. I would urge you to go directly to UCAS, to the website, for more information about this. So here's some information about making your choices, adding university choices through the UCAS Hub. So you have 5 slots to fill. That means that you can apply for up to 5 universities or courses through UCAS. What's crucial for Cambridge, for Oxford, and for dentistry, medicine, veterinary science courses is that there's an early UCAS deadline. This year, it is the 16th of October, which is a Monday, 6 p.m. UK time. So that means that you need to submit your application through UCAS by that time. If you're applying to dentistry, medicine, veterinary science courses, then you need to remember that you can only apply to a maximum of 4 courses in any one of those: medicine, dentistry, veterinary science. You can add choices that have a different deadline later, but you can only have 5 choices in total. And your 5th choice has to be something like biology. So it has to be not those, but related. When you're applying for your undergraduate degree, which I'm assuming everyone here today will be through UCAS, you cannot apply to both Oxford and Cambridge. And whether you choose Oxford or Cambridge, you can't apply for multiple courses at either one of those institutions. And most other universities, but do check their web pages, their prospectuses, and get in touch with those universities and course providers. But most other universities will let you apply to multiple courses at that HE provider, at that institution. So this slide is about replying to your offers via UCAS. Again, all of this information I have just lifted from the UCAS webpage. I will send the slides around at the end if I didn't mention that at the beginning. It may have cut off slightly at the bottom there. Apologies when I've been sharing my screen. So replying to your offers then via UCAS Hub. So you might have heard of a firm choice and an insurance choice. So I'll just clarify these for you now. The firm choice is basically the university, the course that you would most like to go to. It's your #1 pick. If you accept a conditional offer and you meet the conditions, then you have a confirmed place. If that firm choice has some conditions on it and you then meet them, then you have a confirmed place at that firm choice course or university. Your insurance choice is sort of your backup, if you will, your second choice. It's what you would want to do or the university you'd want to go to if you didn't meet the conditions of your firm choice, your first choice. You can only have an insurance choice if your firm choice is a conditional offer. And if your insurance choice, your second choice, is a conditional offer, then you still have to meet the conditions of that insurance choice, that place, in order to be confirmed at that provider. You can accept up to 2 choices. So you can choose 1 firm and 1 insurance, basically. And if your firm choice that you accept is an unconditional offer of a place, i.e. there are no conditions outstanding that you are yet to meet, then your place is guaranteed, you have met those conditions, so you wouldn't have an insurance choice for obvious reasons. You have to reply to all your offers at the same time, and this deadline date to respond depends on when you received the decisions from the universities, the courses that you applied to. So there are lots of deadline dates, so you can have a look on the UCAS webpage for those. Okay. Next bit. Sorry, I'm being really targeted by the sun today, so I'm bopping and weaving a bit. Apologies. Okay, next slide is choosing your courses. So these are some, I guess, top tips, if I may, for how to make those really important subject choices. Choosing your course is a really important decision, and it is a process. So you might find that your decision changes over time. And where we are now in the year, so where are we? We are end of June. This is when we would be expecting applicants to be really sort of firming up their course choices. What you need to do when you're choosing them is make sure you understand the entry requirements. So the grades and the required subjects. Make sure you're taking those into consideration. A little bit later in the session, we'll have a look at an example of what that might look like in practice, in terms of making multiple selections of university courses, having those up to 5 slots to fill with university course choices, and making sure that the entry requirements both the grades and the required subjects are things that are applicable to you. Make sure that you have looked in detail about what each course contains in terms of how you'll be assessed and also what you'll learn. It's often the case, I would say no two university courses are identical, even though there may be many university courses out there with identical names or course titles. So you really should look in detail, comparing different courses, and select those 5 of the ones that you really would like to choose. So make sure that you're looking in detail at the content. Make sure that you're framing this in the perspective of your careers outlook, let's say. Make sure you're considering careers in this. We have had a previous session on careers and the connections between degrees and jobs in different industries. So that recording is available for you to watch if you would like, and if you missed that or if you want a refresher. And one of the key takeaways from that session was that there isn't always this linear path, this sort of obvious vocational link between degrees and careers. And it's often the case that there isn't a specific degree, a specific course that's required by different employers, different industries for different roles. So definitely think about careers and use the resources that are available to you. So one of those is the Using Your Degree webpage on the Cambridge Careers Service. Very interesting to have a look at the transferable skills that people who have taken that course acquire and develop. And also an overview of an example cohort where they ended up. So some of the key industry areas, often proportions of where people ended up after they finished studying. So careers are important, but do remember that there isn't always that, seemingly obvious link. One of the examples I like to use is that if you want to be a lawyer, in the future, you don't have to study law at undergraduate level. You don't have to. You can do a graduate conversion course in law. So that's an example I always like to use. Same for medicine. You can also do graduate medicine courses as well. So make sure that you're keeping your options open. You're exploring related courses. A little bit like, I always like to say, when you're browsing online and customers who bought this also bought that, have that in mind. A lot of prospectus pages and online course pages for universities will have a similar sort of, you might also like, system. For Cambridge, I think it's in one of the corners on the prospectus pages and one of the corners on the website pages, related courses or similar courses are listed. So this is particularly, I would say, the case for arts and humanities courses. I'd say at Cambridge, we have some courses that you may not have heard of before, but actually might end up being a perfect match for you in terms of course choice. So make sure that you're not focused too exclusively on courses that you're assuming you would want to choose. Keep your options open, keep exploring, even at this stage, if you're pretty convinced that you know what you want to do. Remember also that all of your university course choices will be reading the same personal statement from you. So because you're applying through UCAS, and as we saw on the previous slide, personal statement was one of the ones in, was it green? I forget my colours now. It was one of the top ones though, the top bullet points, which means that that's an element that all of your universities require you to complete. And that's something that all of those universities will read. So this is important to consider, because it would be almost impossible for you to apply to history at one university and maths at another. I don't like to say anything is impossible, but that would be a situation that I couldn't conceive a personal statement being able to be written for. So that's what I mean. You have to make sure that you understand that the same personal statement will be read by all of your university choices. And finally, make the most of taster sessions, sample lectures that are available, and open days. And now is my point, I've written it down here, to plug the open days that are happening next week. The Cambridge Open Days are the 6th and 7th of July. If you are able to attend, please do pop into St John's. I will be running around, and so will all of our student helpers and other members of the admissions team. And we would love to meet you. We would love to chat with you. And you can have tours of St. John's, and in the departments and other colleges, there are lots of other opportunities as well. So if you can't make, if you can't physically be present for the open days, still have a look on the Cambridge Open Days website, because there's lots of opportunities like warm-up webinars, so some online sessions, and also virtual tours as well. And a lot of the departments will be putting up sample lectures on their web pages and other resources. So definitely have a look at the Open Day web pages if you're interested, and please do pop along to St. John's and tell me if you've watched the webinar. So, okay, this is a little game that I've got for you. So which UCAS choices work? So I've got 3 examples. And I'll be monitoring the chat for your responses now. So the first one, oh, thank you. Someone's corrected me on the colour. Thank you very much, Cheryl. Thank you. So for the first option, so imagine that you are looking at this and you've been asked to say whether this combination of 5 slots, so these 5 choices via UCAS, are these legit or not? That's basically the question. So what do we think about example number 1? I'll read it out for you. So this hypothetical applicant has selected Birmingham, medicine, and the entry requirements are A*, AA. They've also selected Oxford for medicine, A*, AA are the entry requirements. Leeds for medicine, 3 A's are the entry requirements. Cambridge, natural sciences, 2 A* and an A, the entry requirements there. And Edinburgh medicine, 3 A's. So what are you looking for when you're sort of assessing whether these choices are valid in terms of a combination of a set of 5? And are they? Oh, great, I can see some responses and some reasons. So no, I've got mostly no, it doesn't work. Oh, let me just bring the chat box up so I can see it. There we go. Not possible, as yes, you've all got it, I think. This wouldn't be permissible because Oxford and Cambridge have both been selected. They've both been included as courses. Also, we've got some comments there in the chat about the entry requirements as well. So this will, just like with course choices generally, it's a very personal choice, and it's an important one that you make for yourself as a decision, and it's one that should be informed. For some people, this might be something that they can aim for, in the sense that they are confident that having the minimum entry requirement of their choices as AAA, that's something that they feel comfortable with. It's something to bear in mind, I think, that when you're choosing your university courses, you don't want to be in a position where you are clustering in the sense of grades. So you don't want to be in a position where only one outcome, i.e. you have to get, let's say, A*, A*, was all of your choices, the entry requirements are A*, A*. Ideally, what you want to be doing is having backup choices there. So if your grades aren't A*, A*, which may be what you're aiming for, but because you can't guarantee that that will be the outcome, I think you'll often find that your teachers and advisors will be telling you the same thing as well. It's a good idea to have a sort of step approach, not step 6th term examination paper, but which is the maths admissions assessment, but steps like a staircase, to make sure that if you got, let's say hypothetically, if you got A*, A, B, then you would still have a university choice in there. Am I making sense? I hope I'm making sense. So that was one of the comments, so I wanted to address that because it's a good one. And again, this will be completely unique and personal to you. This is something that you're deciding yourself. It's not something that we can sort of advise you on in that sense. In the same way, when you're picking your course providers, when you're picking your subjects, that's a very personal choice as well. So we have the next example then. So here I've got 5 choices again. Are these legitimate or not? So Cambridge for English, A*, AA, the entry requirements. Durham English Literature, A*, AA. Manchester English Literature, AAB, entry requirements. York English and History, 3 A's. And Bristol, same again, English and History, 3 A's. We have some responses in the chat already. Yes, people are saying yes. Interesting that we have here, because although let's imagine that one of the Cambridge or Oxford ones in the first example was replaced by another university, so that we wouldn't have had the invalid choice of both of them. So let's imagine that it was another university. The fifth, one of the 5, should I say, being not medicine, being natural sciences, it fulfills the criteria of needing that fifth. So that was just something that I forgot to mention for the first example. Apologies for that. So we're having, I think everyone's saying yes, but we have some comments that are really interesting about how you would go about writing your application, like gearing your application towards both English and history. I like the phrasing of that there. And then we also, as well as the subject choices, as one thing to discuss there, we've also got comments about the entry requirements. Having the sort of stepped approach that I was describing earlier. Yes, so thank you everyone for your comments. So I was just reading those there as they were coming in. Yes, so for something like English or English literature on one hand and English and history, so some combined joint honours, as we call it, degrees, I think personally that this combination of 5 choices would work really well, because I think that I can foresee a personal statement and an applicant being genuinely interested in things that cover both English and history, because of course how these subjects work in the sense that they are disciplines that are studied and researched. You can't really talk about English without thinking about history. So some historical components, context of production, things like that. How throughout history, different texts have been received, perhaps. And indeed, a major part of the study of history, I mean, just by saying that is such a sort of a huge umbrella that I've opened up there, but history contains within it the study of things that people produce and things that are significant in a culture, in a time, in a place, and how that changes over the course of time, history. So I can see why you might be able to write a personal statement that speaks to both of those subject areas, because a personal statement could easily be interdisciplinary between those two. So yeah, we've had some comments while I've been rambling on there. We've had some comments that have summarized it very well in the chat. Excellent. Okay, third and final option then in this really fun game show. Okay, so the 5 choices here are UCL, University College London, European Social and Political Studies, and the requirements here are A*, AA. And then we've got Politics, Philosophy and Economics at York for 3 A's. And then we've got Exeter, Politics and International Relations, AAB. Cambridge, HSPS, Human, Social and Political Sciences for A*, AA. And Leeds for International Relations, AAB. Some really nice sounding courses there. I think it's really interesting. What do people think? Yes, no? We've got a couple yeses and a couple no's so far. Interesting. Oh, let me make the chat bigger so I can see more responses, because they are coming in thick and fast. Oh gosh, I clicked the wrong thing. There we go. So let me just have a look. Some are saying that the courses differ too much. So that's interesting. Some people are saying that the courses would work in the sense that all the courses revolve around similar subject areas. So we've got a bit of both sides going on here at the moment in terms of your opinions, which is nice to see. And others are talking about the requirements, the grades. They are stepped in that way. Interesting. Yes. So some people think that it would be quite a difficult task to write a personal statement. It might be too general. Others are saying that those courses seem like they have a lot in common. I guess I'm going to throw the question back to you again. I'm really impressed with your responses and engagement so far. Really appreciate it. Thank you. What do you think you would do? Let's say hypothetically you were in this position and you thought, yeah, I think I'm pretty sure on those 5 courses. How would you confirm to yourself that you would be able to go ahead and submit your applications through UCAS for those 5? What would you need to do you think? Yeah, Rachel, perfect. Check the course content on the university websites. Yeah, looking at subject requirements, making sure that you understand what those courses contain. I would hazard a guess that they probably cover a lot. They're probably a lot of overlap, is what I'm trying to say. They probably cover a lot of topics that maybe, again, even the topics may be called slightly different things, and they might have slightly different authors or concepts or what have you within them. But I think that you would still be able to write a personal statement which covers all 5 courses. But I really do take the points that were made in the chat about it being a task that you would have to understand, that you would need to do that well. Something that was definitely mentioned above, and I forgot to flag it up, so apologies for that, was I was minded to mention it when I talk about human, social and political sciences, because HSPS at Cambridge is not super unique to Cambridge, but it is quite a unique course throughout. So I wouldn't call it completely unique, because there are other, as we can see, other similar courses which cover these various subject areas. But it's something that generally for Cambridge applicants, we understand that some of the courses at Cambridge may not exactly match the other course choices that you're making. So what we have is in this thing called the My Cambridge application, which is an additional supplementary questionnaire that you have to fill in as an applicant to Cambridge, and you'll be sent that after you submit through UCAS, and you need to complete that within the week following the UCAS deadline in October. Yeah, so this My Cambridge application, one of the sections in it is an optional additional personal statement. I will share in the follow-up email the My Cam app webpage, because it has a really useful PDF guide that takes you through all of the sections that you'll be asked to fill in. And one of those is the optional additional personal statement. So this is, and again, I stress optional, and additional in the sense that not a ... to be continued, and it's just the stuff that you kind of wish you could have put in your UCAS personal statement, but you didn't really have the time. It's not that. It's something that you want to talk about, and there is a character limit, 1,200 characters with blank spaces for that optional additional personal statement. It's something that is specific to the Cambridge course, the Cambridge way of teaching and learning, something specific about that Cambridge degree and why you have applied to that specific Cambridge degree. So there is a space, an option for you to write that. If you choose to, it is optional. It might also be relevant for students applying to natural sciences at Cambridge, but single science courses at other universities. Indeed, also engineering. You might be applying for engineering, which is our broad course through which you can pick modules in which you can specialize, etc. At other universities, you might be applying for more specific streams of engineering. So I wanted to mention the My Cam app, the optional additional personal statement there, because I think it's very relevant for some of our courses. Okay, I think we have now a reveal of the answers, which I've actually already done, haven't I, as we go through. So yes, just to recap, the first one wouldn't be valid because of that Oxford and Cambridge both being included. And the second one is, and the third one is, my binaries of crosses and ticks don't cover the nuances that you all picked out really astutely in the chat. So thank you so much for that. So just to summarize, we were talking about how you'd need to look at the course content for each of these university choices, these course choices, sorry, these subjects, and you'd also need to make your own personal decision about the sort of stepped grade requirements that you want to select. So yeah, excellent. Okay. Bringing us back then to the next slide. So what do we look for at Cambridge? What are we looking for in our applicants? I think it's probably the most common question that I get asked. probably tying with how can I stand out? Very common question. So what do we look for then? Sorry, it says that I'm now muted. That's bizarre. I hope you can still hear me. Can you still hear me? My little headset said that I was muted. Thank you. Yes. Okay. Thank you. Apologies. I'm having some technical issues today. So what we're looking for, what's important, are these things called academic ability and academic potential. Now, how you break that down into actual, maybe more tangible things, these are all listed there in the hexagons. Yes, the hexagons. Okay, good. So enthusiasm for chosen subject and knowledge of chosen subject and good fit between the applicant and the course. I think those are all very much interlinked. Subject requirements, what I mean by that is fulfilling the subject requirements. If there are some required subjects, essential subjects, that you fulfill those. And for medicine, I would say, is where the vocational commitment is relevant there. And then intellectual interest and initiative, we'll pick that up on a following slide. So I'll pause for now. To summarize on academic record, which is linked, I guess, to academic ability, I think that's how we could break down that sort of maybe intangible concept into something that's more tangible. There we go. So academic record, I want to talk about A-levels and GCSEs. I'm aware that there are other qualifications, but I'm just talking about these for the time being, just in the interest of time. There is a full list of all the different qualifications that we accept on our website. So I will link it in the follow-up email. So in terms of typical A-level offers, the Cambridge courses, this varies. It varies between the courses, and also the actual offer that you will receive as an offer holder will also vary. It will depend on your, as we'll go into later, individual context, and you as an individual applicant. We might set more challenging offers for candidates. So these are, I must stress, just the typical A-level offers. For arts and humanities courses, it tends to be A-star AA, and for mathematical sciences, it tends to be A-star A. But as well as what I've just said about that being typical, and you as an individual would be set an offer that is individual to you. So you might have a required A-star in a particular subject, for instance. That's kind of what I mean by setting an individual specific to you offer. In addition to those notes, I also added in really bright yellow highlight, remember that most entrants exceed that typical minimum offer. A really good place for you to look on the course website page, on the entry requirements section. If you scroll down on that section to a grey box at the bottom, what you'll find is it says something like, for cohorts in, I think it's 2017, 2018 and 2019, it will then say the proportion of entrants who achieved, and then it will say something like 75% achieved at least grades A-star, A-star A for that particular course, for those particular cohorts. And then it will say something like 90% of those entrants took mathematics, and 82% took physics, and I'm just making this up if you can't tell, and 13% took chemistry. So it will be specific about sort of what the majority of successful applicants took in terms of subjects and what they achieved in terms of their A-level grades. So it's really useful for you to get a sense of the academic standard of recent successful cohorts. In terms of GCSE grades, we don't have a minimum requirement at Cambridge, but we do see that in the majority, successful applicants typically have high proportions of 7s, 8s and 9s at GCSE, but we do look at your GCSE results in the context of both your personal circumstances, your educational history. That is something that you submit to us through UCAS, but there's also additional forms and supporting documents that you can provide. There's more information about, for instance, the extenuating circumstances form on our web pages, so do have a look there or get in touch with me if you want to find out more. So we're looking at that within your context, sorry, your individual context, but also we're looking at those GCSE results within the context of your school. So we understand what your school performance in GCSEs is essentially. What we are not looking for, what is not important in our considerations, what we don't take into account at all, because it's not relevant. We're not looking for a student from a particular type, background, particular school. We're also not going to be looking at any extracurricular activities that are not relevant. What I mean by that is, if you're applying for, let's say, natural sciences, if you are also an excellent musician, that's something that is really important to you, and it's something that you have many achievements in, that's fantastic. There are many opportunities for you to develop that while you're at university. But the fact that you can play the flute to grade 8 standard is not going to be something that we take into consideration when we're deciding whether to give you an offer for natural sciences, let's say, just an example that I've used. So that's what I mean by irrelevant extracurricular activities. Okay, so on this page, I've got what I had previously with the greens and the purples. And I've got some important text boxes that I've added here. I've just realized I've already mentioned the additional optional Cambridge specific personal statement in the My CAM app. And I've already mentioned as well earlier the extenuating circumstances form. So I'll just focus on the text boxes for now. So we assess you individually, contextually, and holistically. So holistically, in the sense that we take everything into consideration. So we're not just looking at one element of your application. So not just one thing that you've submitted or done, whether that's your personal statement or your interview, everything is considered holistically. And we, as I've said earlier, we look at you within context. So that's you, your own personal context, but also we have a lot of other contextual information that we use in the admissions process. There's a whole dedicated webpage to this, actually, the use of contextual data in admissions, I think is the title. I will link it in the follow-up and you can have a read. It's quite a long webpage. It's very useful information, I think, to be aware of as an applicant and also as a supporter of an applicant as well. It's very relevant. It talks a little bit about the information that we have and use in terms of postcode data, for instance, so participation in higher education divided up by local area. So looking at a region, looking at a local area and seeing the proportions of people that go on to higher education. So that's an important context, right? That's an important understanding that we need in order to assess you contextually. That's just one example. We also ask for additional information, as I said earlier. Oh gosh, the sun is really coming in strong now, apologies. We ask for additional information and we have additional requirements as well. The reason that we ask you to submit written work, if we do require that, or to take an admissions assessment, if that's required, is because we want to have a consistent, complete and accurate picture of you. So I'm now going to go on to, a timeline, sorry, forgot the order of my slides, and then I'm going to look at the elements in a little bit more detail. So I think we've mentioned most of these things. I think it's important to look at it in this chronological frame and also to confirm, yes, so we've got the deadline. We've already talked about the early UCAS application deadline. Choosing your college or making an open application, I'll pause on this because again, it's a really common question that I get. It's not going to put you at an advantage or a disadvantage. Your college choice is entirely personal to you. So if you decide to make a college preference at the point of application, or if you decide not to, and therefore you would do an open application, that's completely up to you. The other important point that I wanted to cover, submissions of written work, because I don't believe that I have a slide on that later. If you go on the St John's Applying This Year webpage on our college website, you will see that for each course, there's information, really handy list of whether submissions, written work submissions are required. Just very briefly, there are some specifics for courses like architecture, where you're required to submit a 6-page PDF portfolio. So that has its own its own details, its own requirements, things that you need to look at if that's relevant to you, if you're applying for architecture. But generally, when we ask you for submitted written work, what we're looking for is 1, maybe 2, it will be clear how many you have to submit, pieces of written work, not something you've written especially for us, just examples from your classwork, maybe from coursework. These should have teacher marks on them, and they should also, that in the cover letter that you submit with the piece of written work, you explain to us the context of that piece of written work. So you say if it's a timed essay, you say if it's an extract from your larger EPQ or coursework, you say if it's an essay that you wrote over the course of a few days, let's say at home. So we understand what that piece of work is. We have the context for that. Okay, I think I talk about all of the other elements, so the admissions assessments and the interview in a later slide. Okay, first personal statement then. So we've already covered this in terms of the optional additional personal statement. That bit in bright blue in the bottom left corner is what I was talking about earlier. Just to clarify, a question has come through. Yes, so the additional application form, the My Cambridge application or My Cam app, that submission deadline is the 23rd of October this year, because it's 1 week after the Oxbridge UCAS submission deadline. The other ones, they have their own deadlines. So the extenuating circumstances form, and there's also another form for any long-term illness or disability or medical conditions. And if you would require adjustments at interview, those forms are completed a little bit later. All of the information is on the website. So do have a look at the Applying This Year webpage, and that will be linked in the follow-up email as well. So yeah, really good question. Thank you for asking for clarification on that. So what are we looking for then? I'm conscious of time. I still do have a few slides to get through. So we're looking for you to have a subject and academic focus. So you need to explain with specific examples, as I say here in the third point. You need to give us examples of resources, of activities that you've used and done. You need to, through those examples, explain how particular areas, particular academic topics within your chosen subject, why they appeal to you. So you need to explain that to us. Why are you interested in those specific, and they will be unique to you, areas within your subject? So rather than just saying, I'm interested in history, as I said earlier, I feel uncomfortable just talking about history because there is so much that could be defined as history. So what is it about a particular, I don't know, time period, a particular source, maybe a particular type of source that we study history through, something like that. You've got to be specific. Those are, again, I must stress, just examples that I've pulled from the inner recesses of my brain. So next, through those examples of the topics, the subjects, whatever it is that interests you, you should be demonstrating to us this thing that I love to call informed enthusiasm. So you'll be talking about things that you've done in your own time. You've taken the initiative to go beyond what you've learned in school, beyond the curriculum, to explore different topics maybe, or to explore a topic further. So that's what I mean when I say supercurricular exploration or subject enrichment. And then how you should be talking about these things, that's covered by the last 2 bullet points on this slide. So you should be making reflections and drawing connections, and you should have a research or a researcher approach to this. So in terms of reflections and connections, this will develop as your subject exploration really gets underway. It will snowball, and as you discover more and explore more resources and do more activities, so you're watching documentaries, you're listening to podcasts, you're reading more chapters, you're reading more academic articles, you will be able to reflect more deeply and make more connections. So when you have read that article, that chapter, watched that public lecture on whatever it may be, what did you understand from it? What did you find interesting or challenging? And could you challenge what you found out or read from the resource and tell us why? How could you maybe make a connection to another topic or maybe another resource that you have already explored? Maybe it was something in class that the curriculum doesn't allow you to go into any detail about, or maybe it even glosses it over in maybe quite a problematic way. Maybe curriculum's changed since I was at school, but that was certainly the case for me. I was thinking, oh, we didn't really get taught this fully. We weren't able to go into much detail about this particular element, or there's a gender aspect or a class aspect that that we haven't gone into. So, you know, that's what interests me, for instance, in that situation. That's what I'm going to go and explore more about. And so you'd be able to make a connection there with things that you've discovered through class or through your own exploration. Research minded then. So how did you find the answers to those questions? What did that resource throw up in the sense of questions? And where did you go from there? So if you were conducting an independent research project, that would be led entirely by what you discover. At the start of a research project, you don't actually know where you'll end up. You have an idea, you maybe have a hypothesis, you have some questions that you want to answer, you've done a literature review, which you that basically means you understand what's been thought and said and discussed so far in terms of the academic discipline. But then your own individual exploration will be unique to you. So I'm going to come now to admissions assessments. I'm conscious of time. I've been going quite slowly today through the content in the slides. Apologies for that. We might go slightly over by about 5 minutes. If you do need to go, don't worry, because I will send the full recording to you that you can watch in your own time. So admissions assessments, why we ask you to do these, they give us more information about how you approach problems and tasks. So they give you an opportunity to really stretch and challenge yourself in terms of the subject-specific content and the subject-specific skills that we're looking for. So they help us because we have to assess a lot of very excellent candidates who apply to us, who have similar grade profiles and who all have really excellent personal statements and who all have really stellar teacher references as well. So the admissions assessments can help us make those selections for who we want to invite for interview. In particular, that's the case for some of those ones that are pre-registration required. So those are the ones that you have to apply, register for, by the 29th of September in most cases, and the test date for those, the 18th of October. Examples of those are the BMAT for medicine, the natural sciences admissions assessment for natural sciences, for chemical engineering, and also for veterinary medicine. And I'm definitely forgetting one, the TMUA for economics and for computer science. I've definitely forgotten one, apologies. I'll list them all in a following slide. So as I say, these tests are going to be challenging. That's what they're designed to do. They're meant to challenge and stretch you. What you should do to prepare for them then, you should practice using the resources that are available to you. So each of these admissions assessments has their own dedicated webpage. The past papers, the sample questions will all be on there, freely available to you. Please don't buy any packs of papers because all of those will just be taken from these freely available resources. So everything, I must stress, is available to you through the admissions assessment web pages online. Make sure that you're using those resources, practicing with them in timed conditions. Because often what you'll find, the difficulty of a lot of these admissions assessments, it's not necessarily the content. A lot of that is broadly taking a lot of the subject content of what you've studied at school and maybe stretching a little bit further, pulling together multiple elements, making you think in a different way. But the key challenge in a lot of these tests, these admissions assessments, is being able to do that in timed conditions. So make sure that you are revising your subject-specific skills and content. As I say, a lot of these assessments will be testing you on that first and foremost. Make sure that you have, as I said, check the registration date. You need to register by that date. You would normally be registering through your assessment centre, which is your college or your school. And make sure that you're keeping up to date via the admissions assessment web pages for all the latest information. So I've got a screen grab there from the admissions assessment pre-registration required. So these are the tests that used to be called pre-interview tests. So they come into play when we are selecting applicants for interview. We are looking for you to do really well in these admissions assessments. What are Cambridge interviews like then? Okay, so typically you would have 2 interviews, and in each interview you would typically have 2 subject experts who would be your interviewers. Approximately, these interviews are going to be about 30 minutes each, and they're conducted by subject specialists. The actual format of these interviews, in terms of how many you have and how long they last, will vary by course. You will be told in advance what to expect. So you will know when your interviews are, and you'll know how long they are. So that information will all be delivered to you ahead of time. What the interviews actually are then, they are interactive dialogic. I just realized I actually don't know how to say that word. Pretty sure that's how you spell it, but I don't know how to pronounce it. Apologies. They're interactive dialogues that test you. There we go. They are testing your core subject knowledge and your core subject skills. They're looking for you to demonstrate informed enthusiasm for your subject. So what we mean by that, as we were saying earlier, you can talk about evidenced examples of things that you've read or done that have furthered your subject knowledge and your interest in the subject. And that's specific. You would be able to give specific examples. We are also testing through the interview your aptitude for the Oxbridge style of teaching and learning, and also your chosen course, because these interviews are essentially like the tutorials at Oxford and the supervisions at Cambridge, these small group discussion-based teaching and learning methods that are quite unique to Oxbridge and are excellent ways of collaboratively learning and discussing problems as you're sort of forming them and making connections and hearing from other people's perspectives and understanding multiple solutions or multiple approaches or multiple arguments to a particular question or problem or issue. So that's why that's why these interviews exist, essentially. You'll be expected in your interview to do the following: to expand on your personal statement and maybe other elements of your application, perhaps a sample of submitted written work. You'll be expected to respond critically to new information and ideas. This will vary by the course. It might be a data set, it might be a graph, it might be an image, it might be a piece of text passage. We would be looking for you to apply existing knowledge to unfamiliar problems or arguments. We're looking for you to essentially demonstrate this thing called intellectual flexibility and logical reasoning. And you can also expect to receive guidance if you need guidance from your interviewers. This may be asking for clarification about what the question is actually asking you. That's absolutely fine. The interviewers will be doing their best to answer clear questions, clear questions that you can easily answer. They're not looking to confuse you. But as in a conversation, you might have to clarify what someone has asked you. That's absolutely fine in an interview. They are keen and prepared to do that if needed. And also, if you are not sure in response to an answer, if you've said, well, I have studied this, or I have read this, or I've learned that, I'm not sure if that is applicable here to this, I don't know, equation, this problem, or this text, this document, whatever it may be, they will be able to guide you in the sense that they'll say, okay, it might be, but if I tell you that this data set graph is actually, and then they'll give you a little bit more information about what this unseen stimulus is that they have given you in the interview. That's also what I mean by receiving guidance. So they will also help you and guide you so that you can sort of formulate the answers yourself. What's been slightly cut off at the bottom there, apologies if you can see what I can see with the slightly cut off last line. What I have said there is interviews are not a series of trick questions. They are not an assessment of your character, your accent, your appearance, your clothes, nothing like that. It's about the thinking person inside. One of our directors of studies here at St. John's describes the interview's assessment in that way. It is all about the thinking person inside. That's what they're interested in. So how do you prepare for interviews then? In terms of STEM interviews, I would recommend the following: revising your course relevant content from your school curriculum, keeping up to date with all of the things that you have learned through your A-levels, for example, but also engaging and exploring beyond the curriculum. As I've said, what I want to note here is that the interview, which is in early December, this is obviously after you have submitted your personal statement. What that doesn't mean is that everything you do in terms of your engagement and your exploration stops when you submit your personal statement. That's not what we advise at all. When you've written your personal statement, continue on with that subject engagement, with that supercurricular exploration, because a common question you could get asked in interview is, okay, what have you read recently? Or what have you learned recently? Or what have you explored recently? what have you done since you have presented us with this material, this personal statement, this piece of submitted work, whatever it is that's made up your application that the interviewers will be assessing. So make sure you are continuing, essentially, with the subject exploration, with the supercurricular enrichment stuff that you've been doing in order to write your personal statement in the first place. Crucially, I think about how you might push back on your own personal statement. I think that's a really good way of preparing for interviews. I can remember looking at my personal statement and thinking, I've read a few things since that would make me think, actually, there's a far more interesting question that I didn't pick out in my personal statement because I hadn't read and explored whatever those articles or resources were. So do be conscious that you might be asked to sort of push back, and your personal statement will be sort of used perhaps as a springboard for discussion. So you can help yourself by preparing for that, thinking about, okay, if I were to write that paragraph again in my personal statement, if I were to talk about that resource, if I were to reflect on that chapter, that article again, what would I say now? That's a good question to ask yourself, I think. Gosh, I'm going to have to shift. I'm really being blinded by the sun here, apologies. Practice, so this is STEM specific, practice problem solving out loud, solo, and in groups. Why I've said this is because it's really important to build that habit of talking out loud those problems and how you go about solving them, and getting support in peer groups as well to do that. So that's a really important way of preparing for STEM interviews, I would say. Arts and humanities and social sciences, revising course relevant content and engaging and exploring beyond the curriculum. So all of the things I've said above. I've not put reread personal statement and submitted written work just because it's for STEM courses, you're not asked to submit written work typically, so that's why I've not included that, but you should still be rereading your personal statement for all interviews. So for arts, humanities and social sciences, the additional ones I want to discuss are practicing those discussion skills, those argument forming skills, and those viewpoint justifying skills as well. Again, out loud, solo, and in groups. It's really important to build up that habit, make it habitual, the act of talking through your ideas, your approaches, your arguments, and practice by reading and analysing unseen materials, unseen passages, just as you would when you're revising, let's say, for your language exam, you would be practicing your translation and comprehension skills. That is the same sort of subject-specific skills that we would want you to be practicing in preparation for your interview. So I finally come to the end. My goodness, sorry, that was a lot of content to get through. There are a couple more slides, but this is the main sort of takeaway points here. So a summary of what we've covered today and some next steps for you. Think carefully about your subject or course choices and make sure you explore your universities and your courses widely in order to make the best UCAS choices for you as an individual. So we played that little game. Can I call it a game? Not really. We did that little activity of looking at all the 5 subject choices in those 3 examples. We discussed a little bit about how you would make those choices for yourself as the applicant in that situation. So definitely reflect on that, reflect on your own course choices, your own subject choices. And then how can you improve and practice independent research and critical thinking? So this intellectual flexibility, this informed enthusiasm, all of those things that we've talked about in relation to supercurricular exploration in previous webinar sessions, and also today, putting them in the context of your interview and your personal statement in particular. How can you go away and improve and practice those skills? These skills that I like to call university student skills, because the independent research, the critical thinking, that analysis, that's what you'll be doing as a university student. So putting that into practice and doing that subject exploration, that is what's going to help you prepare for university and prepare for your university application as well. And then finally, in red, because it's very important, remember that the best decision, in this case, the best course, subject, UCAS, whatever you may be, choice, the best decision is the one that is informed and it's your own. That's the point I want to leave you with, as well as a couple plugs for some really great resources and activities. So CAM Guides, the University of Cambridge libraries, have put together an online resource. It's completely free to access It's really useful if you want guidance and support on academic skills and developing those academic skills. So things like note-taking, referencing, citing, time management, I think is one as well, finding academic articles, all of these things that you can use to support your application preparation, you know, whether it's finding articles and resources and things like that for your personal statement or your interview. So CAM Guides is excellent. It's designed to help support students in the transition from school to university, but I think it's extremely applicable in the case of you guys now in the stage that you're at in terms of preparing a competitive application. So have a look at CAM Guides. And then also I wanted to mention, I've not included this on my slide, so I'll just say it before it drops out of my head. The St. John's subject admissions clinics, yes, tomorrow is the deadline to register for those. There are a range of subject-specific admissions clinics that are happening throughout July. And if you want to sign up to those, these are Q&A sessions that are held on Zoom. And a director of studies, so an academic who would be looking after your teaching and learning, and a student representative, as well as a member of the admissions team, will be present to answer your questions from all of those different perspectives. So do sign up for those if you're interested. Then the thing that's on the top there of the slide, how you sign up for these, sorry, there will be a link that I'll include in the follow-up email. But essentially, if you just go to the St. John's College webpage, which is joh.cam for Cambridge.ac.uk, and then you go to study here, and in the drop-down menu, you'll see an option that's open days and events. That's where I post all of our upcoming events and programs. So one of those events and programs that's upcoming is the St. John's poster competition for 2023. This is an opportunity that's available to UK-based students in year 12, so students that are about to apply year 12 or equivalent that are applying this year. It's a super curricular opportunity. It enables you to consolidate a lot of this research and exploration, this subject enrichment that you've been doing. There are more details on that webpage there. You will get the hyperlink. Indeed, when you get the slides, you'll be able to go directly to that webpage that I was just talking about, the Open Days and Events page. That's where it is linked. So yes, the poster competition, the deadline is the 4th of August. You can submit from any subject that you would like, as is, I hope hinted by the logo. I hope the theme is dark. I've got a lovely image of some fireworks going off at the back of the New Court building in St. John's. So the theme this year for the competition is dark. So your submission, your poster project, your research needs to be linked, maybe tangentially, to the theme of the competition, and that is dark this year. So more information about the poster competition is on that webpage. That is all from me, only slightly over time. Apologies for that. Thank you very much. I'm now going to pause here, so the recording will end here. Thank you very much.